Welcome to Family Gamer TV. Now, if you track with the channel, you're probably aware of a video game called That Dragon Cancer. This follows the story of Amy and Ryan Green and their son Joel, who was diagnosed with terminal brain cancer when he was 1 year old. But along with the video game, there's also a documentary film coming out called Thank You for Playing, which documents the process of how that game came to be. And today we've got David and Malika Zuhali-Worrell, the directors of the film, with us to talk about a bit of the game, but more importantly, how they came to be making a film about it. So maybe you could start by introducing us to how you came across the project.
Yeah, sure. So we read a brief blurb about That Dragon Cancer on a website called Kill Screen Daily a couple of years ago, and were immediately intrigued by this idea of someone making a video game about such a personal experience. And so we called up Ryan and Josh Larson, who was the co-creator of That Dragon Cancer, and went out to Colorado for a 4-day shoot, just kind of getting a sense of what this experience was going to be for the family working on the game, and also just for the creatives team at that point. And from there, the film quickly ballooned into a feature-length film.
Yeah, nice. And so when you went out there, was it what you expected?
We were not quite sure what to expect. We knew that the game was beautiful. We had seen this reference art, and we thought that it was this really special sort of, conglomeration of different kinds of mediums being put together. It was artistic, it was like paintings in some ways, but we didn't quite know what the actual interactivity would necessarily be. It looked to us like an interactive documentary, which is, I think, why, as filmmakers, we kind of gravitated towards this project so quickly. We started understanding that a lot of the story that we'd be following, Thank You for Playing, was just the evolution of what it's like to create art out of a personal experience, regardless of the medium, regardless of whether it's a video game or a painting or a novel. It's kind of just this reinterpretation of your life and the things that you go through this video game form, and that was really interesting to follow for 2 years.
You had access to Ryan and Amy and the family, as well as the other creators on the game. So in terms of the individuals creating this, what were they like?
I guess I think both of us were kind of really amazed to be working with people who are actually especially open. Ryan and Amy, in the process of making this game, had decided to share an incredibly difficult experience with the world. Remarkably, they also were able to apply that attitude towards working with us on the film. Pretty early on, gave us pretty much full access to their lives, including, really some of the hardest moments you could go through in your life. They were, they really felt that those were things that they wanted to be sharing and they wanted to be talking about publicly, and so they kind of allowed us to film in some ways that maybe you wouldn't normally expect.
Yeah, and it feels like we've got a little bit of footage here that it's really intimate, isn't it? It almost feels that there's an element of almost intrusion, and I guess that comes with the documentary sort of space.
Well, I think one thing that first of all, that was always on our minds, the idea of we wanted to make sure we didn't feel like we were intruding. And I think that there were two elements of that within the film. One is that Ryan and Amy were essentially also in the process of making a documentary just in video game form, and I think it felt a bit more safe to be in this space where there was already this creative introspection happening. Like they were already kind of looking at their lives in this creative way, in this distanced way, and that kind of gave us the sense to feel as though, okay, maybe it's all right to be telling this story. They were so generous in letting us into their lives. They wanted us to be filming because it was very much a part of their experience, and we were able to capture things that they weren't able to capture because they didn't have video cameras. They had Twine, they had Unity, they had video game software to develop.
And I think ultimately they decided, or they had learned pretty quickly soon after Joel's terminal diagnosis, that people in their world and maybe in kind of Western society in general just don't talk about these experiences nearly as openly as one would expect. And I think they kind of set out to flout that taboo in some ways, and they actually wanted to start conversations with people about the experience of having a family member who was terminally ill, because they felt like socially it was something that was so often privatized.
And so did there Did that experience of going sort of through that process with them, did that change your perspective of video games and what video games are?
Yeah, I'd say for sure. I mean, I think we were both kind of aware of the indie game kind of world a little bit by that point. You know, going to a number of these conferences and really both not only seeing what other games are out there, but also seeing what a nurturing and accepting culture it is. Ryan and Amy would also say that they've been kind of accepted into this world, even though there are some ways in which they might be pretty different from other people in the indie gaming world. And they've also met other people who are very different from them and learned that like part of the indie gaming world is this kind of acceptance of difference in a way that sometimes can be pretty radical. Ryan and Amy are Christian and are kind of very religious themselves, and felt for them it was important to bring that religion and that aspect of their lives into their game. For the most part, within the like genuine indie gaming community, I think it was really interesting to see how much acceptance there was among folks who weren't religious themselves, but were able to recognize that was part of Ryan and Amy's identity.
So sort of switching back to the film, I mean, it'd be worth talking about, it's called Thank You for Playing, so I'm interested to hear, where does that title come from?
There's a moment in the film where folks are playing the game and the rough build of That Dragon Cancer, which at this point, around 2 years ago, was just a demo scene. And at the end of the demo, Ryan and Josh had coded in the words, "Thank you for playing," to come up at the end of people experiencing the demo. Person after person sitting down and having this emotional response to the game. And this is one of the first moments that we realized how special That Dragon Cancer was, based on people's reaction to it and how it was engendering this conversation between Ryan and gamers who would come over and play the game with him. And also it was just this moment of realizing that there was a really special story happening here that wasn't just about a guy making a video game about his child, but also just this idea of connectivity between ourselves and how we learn to talk about emotions that are otherwise difficult to talk about, and the spaces we choose to talk about those emotions. In this case, the space was a video game conference, which is a rarefied space for speaking candidly about how you feel. So we saw that text, "Thank you for playing," and I think it kind of just occurred to us that was more than just thank you for trying out a demo, but it was also thank you for engaging in this emotional experience with me, the creator of this game, Ryan. And I think we both really appreciated that.
I think ultimately the film is about the role that art plays in our lives. I mean, obviously it's about the making of a video game, but and the kind of challenging the boundaries of what video games can be and what they can do. But I think ultimately it kind of examines why we as humans why art is so central to our lives, and how art is has become a way that we can express and explore some of the most difficult experiences we go through in our lives. I mean, I think that's one thing that's always really stood out to me about Ryan and Amy's story.
I think the film covers a lot of ground in terms of what it's sort of parsing with the idea of dealing with grief and trying to use art to deal with grief. But it's kind of an invitation to think about the way in which we go through the process of grief, and how art is kind of a proxy and has been throughout history as a way to deal with the things that are otherwise very impossible to deal with in life.
And does that overlap in the film in terms of the Greens' Christian faith? Because obviously that's another location, isn't it, where historically we deal with grief and loss.
Absolutely, yeah. I think that faith historically is also in another way that we we use faith to accept things that are otherwise unacceptable, and to explain things that are otherwise unexplainable. And to be able to create this video game for the Green family, also a way to be able to have some control in their lives, which is something that religion also provides us. And to be able to, as Ryan and Amy would say, kind of, to surrender that control a little bit and to accept grace into your life was a very important thing for them. And to be able to make this video game alongside of their religion was very, I think, very important for them to do. We aren't particularly religious, Malika and I, but we definitely wanted to make sure that we included their faith into the film because it's central to their life, it's central to their belief system. And because we're talking about these things that are so difficult to talk about, especially with the idea of of family and what happens after loved ones die and how we remember them. I think it's very important to consider the role that people feel faith has in their lives as it comes to remembering and as it comes to memorializing.
One thing we were interested in the film was kind of in general exploring what are the thought processes you're going through in grief, and so I think obviously in their case the kind of main manifestation of that was the creation of this work of art as a means of expressing and sharing and kind of getting these kind of experiences out and not having it bottled up, but as David said, faith was also very important to them. But I think what was really special was that Ryan and Amy were willing to open up to us about all of that. So in the same way that you see them exploring their doubts around making the art and like their kind of quandaries over how to make this work of art to accurately express their experiences, as anyone would, they also had quandaries about how this could be happening in the context of their faith. Why is my child dying and what is going to happen to my child after they die? And I think we kind of saw a lot of those issues as relevant even to audiences who aren't religious at all.
And so I think you've got a Kickstarter at the minute, is that right? To get the film in front of more people?
Yeah, so basically right now via our Kickstarter you can order a copy of the film, you can order a copy of the game. Organizations and universities and churches and companies can also book a screening of the film for their community or their company through the Kickstarter. And so it's been really cool actually to connect with a lot of with professors, with gaming companies, with religious institutions who want to book the film, and so that it's been really great to see the response to that so far.
So it's going to be in theaters in the US starting March 18th, and it'll be starting in New York and will be in other cities following that.
Great, well that sounds really awesome. I can't wait to see the film in full. I'll be keeping an eye on how the Kickstarter does, but today, thank you for your time, really appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Andy.
Thanks, Andy.